So back to social media, because that's what those 8 doctors in Wuhan did last year. They were concerned about the virus. They could tell something was different. They were concerned. They were talking to their fellow doctors on WeChat. Again, that's like a Chinese Facebook or Twitter app, and they were censored because what they said was inconvenient or embarrassing. Well, fast forward to now in Canada, and look at this. Federal government open to new law to fight pandemic misinformation. It's one of several measures the government is considering to counter fake news about the virus online. Just to be clear, they're talking about the Canadian government, not the Chinese government, even though they're doing the same thing. The government is deciding what you can or can't say about the virus. They're fighting rumors, they say, just like the Wuhan police said. I've checked, and I don't see anything from all the usual suspects. PEN International, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, Canadian Journalists for Free Expression, Canadian Association of Journalists, they're all fine with this. Of course they are. They're all part of the establishment, same general worldview. Government knows best, the UN knows best, globalism makes sense. Anyone who doubts the public health deep state is probably a crank or a kook. More to the point, all the journalists are on Trudeau's bailout payroll now, so it's hard for them to pretend to be independent. The federal government is considering introducing legislation to make it an offense to knowingly spread misinformation that could harm people, says Privy Council President Dominique LeBlanc. LeBlanc told CBC News he is interested in British MP Damien Collins' call for laws to punish those responsible for spreading dangerous misinformation online about the pandemic. LeBlanc said he has discussed the matter already with other cabinet ministers, including Justice Minister David Lametti. If the government decides to follow through, he said, it could take a while to draft legislation. Oh, okay. So no bothering with bills in Parliament or debates in Parliament. He just chatted about it with David Lametti, the Justice Minister, the crooked Justice Minister who took over from Jody Wilson-Raybould because she was too honest for Trudeau. And Lametti said he was totally fine with Trudeau interfering in the SNC Lavalin case, the prosecution of them for corruption. We're in the best of hands, aren't we? Let me read some more. Legislatures and parliaments are meeting scarcely because of the current context of the pandemic, so it's not a quick solution, but it's certainly something that we could be open to as a government, said LeBlanc. NDP MP Charlie Angus said he would support legislation to fight online information. Yeah, you don't say. An NDPer wants to censor you. And look at this little headline in the middle of the story. Cranks wreaking havoc. They're not talking about themselves and their bizarre advice over the last few months to not close borders to the virus, to not put on masks. No, they're not the cranks. They say you're the cranks. Let me read some more. Extraordinary times require extraordinary measures. And it is about protecting the public, he said. This is not a question of free speech. No, why would you say that? This is a question of people who are actually actively working to spread disinformation, whether it's through troll bot farms, whether it's state operators, or whether it's really conspiracy theorists, cranks, who seem to get their kicks out of creating havoc. Really? It's not a matter of free speech, eh? When a censor tells you that, you know it precisely is a matter of free speech, or why else would they have mentioned it? I'll read some more. The comments from LeBlanc and Angus come as governments around the world struggle to curb dangerous misinformation and disinformation circulating about the COVID-19 pandemic. More recently, said Collins, the misinformation has shifted to conspiracy theories about what triggered the pandemic, claims that it was cooked up in a lab, for example. Hang on, is that really fake news, though? I mean, that's what China says, but it's pretty much accepted as fact now that it has something to do with the official government virus labs in town. I mean, we all know that's where it came from in one way or another, whether it was an accident or a weaponized virus. That's not really in doubt anymore. And even if it was, how does that in any way stop the virus or not stop the virus? Why would a government care if you hold a wrong opinion about where the virus came from? How's that any of the government of Canada's business? You want to see some fake news? Check out this fake news. Look at this. 1% of British Columbians have COVID-19. Have all the physical distancing measures brought in been worth it? Wow, 1%. That's worse than I thought. There's just over 5 million BCers, about 5.1 million British Columbians. So 1%, that's 51,000 cases. It's almost as much as the United States. Yeah, no, they only have just over 1,500 cases. So by my math, out of 5.1 million citizens, that is 0.03%, not 1%. The CBC was off by 30-fold. That's fake news. Do they have to go to jail? That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.